Hi, I'm Josh Cadillac, and welcome to my podcast, Know Your Shit. I've been blessed to see great success, as well as seeing the bottom up close and personal in 2008. And if there's one lesson I've learned, is that if you want to have success and differentiate yourself from everyone else out there, you need to know your shit. As a successful real estate and crypto investor and an educator, it drives me insane that people do not immerse themselves in their craft. Everyone is so busy advertising and testing new sales techniques, they forget the most important thing, the product. Here I want to talk to the folks that got this right, the most successful people in the world in every industry. Bring them to you and find out what they learned in their business that made it great. When you listen to my podcast, you will know for sure that the topics and experts we have on have one thing in common. They know their shit. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Know Your Shit podcast, where our knowledge and pride in what we do drives us to be excellent. My name is Josh Cadillac, and I'll be in the driver's seat for today's show as we strive to learn how to stop doing deals and start closing for life. We have a great show for you today, and we have a great guest. Somebody I count as a personal friend, and somebody that has the unique honor of being somebody that I know my father had tremendous respect for. I don't get a lot of these people on, so it's great to have you here, Mr. Larry Pino. Thank you for being here, sir.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation, Josh. And actually, that's another way of telling everybody how old I am.
Sorry about that.
But that's okay. It was a wonderful time. And for all of your viewers and your listeners, it's worth noting that I literally knew Josh and his younger siblings from literally the time that we would go into deals. Josh's father and myself as his attorney, and we'd go into deals, and his father would put him in the corner and say, "Sit there and listen." And Bob would, his dad Bob would actually be doing the deal, and I'd be there, and they would be church mice. Josh and Timothy would be there in the corner and just absorbing it. And, and then there came a time when Josh's father passed away, which was terribly sad. My wife and I went to the funeral and down there and had the opportunity. Josh at that point was just starting to dabble himself. And then next thing I know, as years go by, he has developed this incredible career out there. So I am very proud of this guy and what he's achieved. And now, of course, he's got the book. And where are you in the cycle for that one? Has it hit the stands yet or not?
It hits July 11th, and so it's written. It got written a lot faster than I thought it would. I'm always tending to underthink what I can do. Like I'm always terrified that they're going to give me a timeline that I can't quite hit. But I think they gave me 6 months. I got it done in like 6 weeks.
Oh my gosh! Well,
it was, like the paranoia. I'm like, all right, I got to write this many thousand words and whatever. But it just kind of came, and I've been talking about it a lot. I teach a lot on specific things, but never really on the topic of that book. But at the beginning of a lot of the classes that I do, I spend time on that idea of, building a business rather than just chasing paychecks.
Yeah.
So, it's very much, and it let me talk a lot about my dad and all these ideas that I picked up from him, because that's really what the book is about, is kind of the lessons that he taught me that you don't hear in mainstream real estate or business for that matter, that wind up being those important things. So, you kind of alluded to it, Larry, but why don't you tell everybody what it is you do?
So really 3 things, just real quick background. I, graduated from University of Notre Dame and then went to law school, went to New York University Law School and 3 years. And, certainly New York City is the place to be in terms of being a lawyer. I got the offers, interviewed, got the offers with big law and all that. And I said, you know what, I just don't want it. I don't want it. I took a look at their lifestyles, and they were making big bucks. They still make big bucks, right? But I just simply did not want to do that for myself. So I came back home, which is Central Florida, and started a law practice. So began a law practice, and I literally started a law practice. I got myself hired a high school graduate as my legal secretary. And went out and bought a typewriter and just put a sign up and said, IR lawyer, and just started my law practice. Started How I got into the speaking, by the way, before I tell everybody what else I've done, is that's kind of, I was sitting there with Cecilia, who was Cuban. So I had an espresso machine. So we'd sit there all day long and drink espresso. My hand would shake like this the entire day.
Yeah.
And phone never rang. And I was trying to, okay, I'm a lawyer, but nobody's calling. So a fellow that I knew had invited me to a Kiwanis meeting. And I had no idea what the Kiwanis Club was. So I go to the Kiwanis Club, and they had a speaker. It's a lunch. They have the program and the speaker speaks for about 20 minutes and takes some questions and so forth. And I went back to Cecilia that day, and I said, Cecilia, I got it, man. There's a speaker who speaks in front of a bunch of businessmen, and they do a talk, and they meet people. I said, I can do that. I was a debater in college and law school. I can do that. So Cecilia started banging out, my name is Larry Pino. I'm a practicing lawyer. And I've been practicing for a few months, practicing lawyer in downtown Orlando. I do talks in the following areas, how to create a contract, how to buy a business, how to sell a business. Just 5 topics. I'd never done one before, but I did 5 topics. And she'd bang them out on the Selectric 3 typewriter, and she'd mail 20, 30 a day. And the phone started ringing off the hook. And so I'd go in for a breakfast or a lunch mostly, and I'd do a talk. And, doesn't matter what the question was, it was always excellent question.
Sure.
And I'd answer, and then I'd answer the question. I'd say, listen, if you want any further detail, feel free to come on up and we can talk afterwards. And after about 9 months from the time that I started law practice, I had several pages of clients. And that's what got me into the seminars and the speakers into speaking. So in any event, so I started the practice. It was a commercial law practice. And literally, 40 years later, it still is. And it's a very broad practice of law in just about any area of practice that's related to real estate, related to business, related to securities, related to transactions. And we do extensive literally for clients around the country. So that's really number one. The second thing, after I got back to Orlando, is I got immediately into the sporting goods business with my dad. And that began sort of the second leg of my career because I've always been involved in business. So I've done some 80 startups over my career for some 2.5 billion in asset value and about $1.5 billion of sale of products and services, probably over 2,500 employees. And I've done that. So I've always practiced law. I've always been in a business of some type. Right now I'm getting, I co-founded an AI firm, artificial intelligence firm.
Nice.
And I'm also involved in senior living. So there's that. And then the final thing, I have been from, what I didn't tell you is when I put up that sign out front, it was a building that I put an option on, which was a commercial historical building, which I put an option on it with a right to remodel the inside. And then I remodeled it, and that became my law office. And it was a Soho apartment. You remember seeing it as a kid, I'm sure. And it had the great big Cinzano umbrella. And, it had the skylights where the old ovens used to be because it was a bakery. And that's kind of where I practiced. And what it also taught me was you do historical properties, you get ITC, and based on the total property, not just the amount that you've invested in it. So investment tax credits. And then that pretty much was the next. So over these past 40 years, my primary focus for investments has been in real estate of any nature. First single families, and then, after that, commercial buildings of different types of asset classes. And then privately held real estate notes quite a bit. I wrote the book on that one.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, cash in on cash flow.
Yeah.
And then stocks and options, which I still do pretty extensively. So real short, anything with the law practice. So lawyering in the business, real estate, securities field, businesses and entrepreneurship and investing. And I just have a blast. I love it, and I will never retire.
I love that. I love it. When you love what you're doing, why would you stop? It's a thing.
I tell my clients, because they say, well, Larry, what happens when you decide that you're going to retire? I said, you know what? I'm going to retire when God tells me I have to retire.
Yeah, he's gonna pull the pin, not you.
Yep.
It's a good thing. It's the idea of I like to Timothy calls it vocation. The idea that you're made for something, and if you figure out what that thing you're made for is, nothing's going to make you happier than doing that. So as a hammer's happiest when hammering a nail, go figure out what your nail is and hammer.
Go for it. Yeah.
And so it's awesome to hear you say that, because I always know that was the thing that always made the relationship so good with my dad, was the fact that it wasn't just the law. It was this fully rounded perspective of having to actually live with the consequences of everything all together in the business and bring it all together.
Yeah.
So one of his big lessons to me always was to know what comes before and what comes after what you do. It makes you so much better at what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that was always what made the conversation so good to listen to, at least in my little ears when I was hanging out with you guys. So where do you think, Larry, where did all the success come from for you?
I don't, well, now, and just understand, lots of success, of course, but certainly, I certainly had my share of failures. And when I failed, I didn't fail small. I failed big too. And then in addition to that, there's this really sort of small thing. It was called the Great Recession. Yep. I was running a $250 million a year business at the time with 600 employees when it slammed into, the perfect storm. And, I was very exposed in the markets because we had decision analysis tools. Technology decision analysis tools was called WiseTrade, which we had for the markets. And, when Lehman Brothers went down, the market went down, and boy, it was hell trying to keep that. And I had a number of training programs traveling around the country. We were doing 232 seminars a week.
Oh, wow.
232 seminars a week around the country. And they were all impacted by the recession. They were in real estate. They were in equities, stock. They were in Forex. We had auto trading programs that we were doing seminars for. You can only imagine when real estate collapsed in September of 2007 and Lehman collapsed in April of 2008 and consumers collapsed in October of 2008. It was literally, I went from 232 seminars a week down to less than a handful on a weekly basis because nobody was showing up.
Yeah. And
you couldn't get a credit card out of somebody's hands. It was going to be their dead hands, man. You're not going to get a credit card. Yeah. So in any event, back to your question. So obviously, big wins, but also certainly big losses too. Now, with that said, there are probably two components to it, maybe a few more. I've always had the ability to be able to, let me give you an illustration. So I got involved in senior living primarily because mom was at a point when she was fine until she wasn't fine. And it became clear that, she stayed home. I stopped sending her to the hospital. I got a full-timer to live with her as a live-in. And that was wonderful. And for what it lasted, she was Italian, as my mom was Italian. And so from that standpoint, it was just fine. And then her, friends, she had, her top 400 friends. She was always very social, but they started whittling down. to the fact that the only people that were visiting her were us. Every weekend, every Saturday, every Sunday, we'd go over to Mom's. I'd put her 7 minutes away from me in Winter Park. And that was all her, that was the only socialization she had. So I started looking around for assisted living, and nothing in those days. It was just like, I would never do that to my mother. It was just awful, whether it was smells or, the way that they were treated or all that. I never wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
But, being entrepreneurial, at a certain point, I started looking at it and saying, and I knew nothing about senior living, but I kept saying, I wonder what it would have to look like. I wonder what it would have to look like. And I started constructing these pictures in my mind as to what it would have to look like. And then I started not painting it, but, putting notes down on paper as to what it would have to look like.
Sure.
And then pretty soon I started creating a little charter for what it would have to look like, until I finally identified a particular thesis that it had to have the high ceilings. It had to have lots of natural light, lots of windows. It had to have the aromas. It had to have herbs and basil near the front door, and an exposed Tuscan kitchen where they're making, Italian sauces, and right out in front of everybody. And it had to have, and guess what? That became Tuscan Gardens.
Mm-hmm.
So I think maybe number one is that you create a vision of something that you want to have happen.
Mm-hmm.
And you identify where you are today. And then you begin the process of always aware of your surroundings, but heading in that direction. And in heading in that direction, you allow yourself the opportunity to, it's kind of like a rubber band that you're slowly pulling, and you're pointing that rubber band until you eventually release it.
Mm-hmm.
And you go in the direction that you want to go in, and all of a sudden, what you've got is you actually have a manifestation and an operationalization of what was in your mind, and it was just an image and a vision.
Right.
And it's in your mind. And that's really the way that I have run every organization that I've run. Mm-hmm. It's always been that dynamic tension between where you are today. So it's act today, but be aware of where you want to be tomorrow.
Right.
So that you're constantly going in a particular direction, which is why virtually every business, out of the 80 startups, most of them were in fact successful, some more successful than others, some smaller than at others, but most of them scaled primarily because I always created that internal dynamic tension. And it allowed me to always be able to go forward. And the way that I've described it in the past is I look to see where I've gone by looking in the rearview mirror. And I'm looking simultaneously at where I need to go based on what's in my mind, based on where I want it to go. Sure. And that's the constant tension you're going forward on. And I think that if I were identifying sort of anything that I would consider to be sort of a principle that has been a forceful mechanism that has allowed me to do what I've done, I think that would be one.
Okay.
The second thing I think that I would probably suggest to you is that I have always maintained for pretty much, certainly my entire adult life, a recognition that I am 100% personally responsible for my outcomes. I'm 100% personally responsible for my outcomes. There is no such thing as victimization. I am a victim of nothing. It is, I'm 100%. If something happened, I did it, period.
Yep. Whether you're a victim or not, there's just no equity in being a victim. Like there's, right. If you're a victim, you're out of control. There's nothing you can then do to fix it. So that's why put yourself in that position?
Right. So in personal responsibility, it's just kind of like, you know what? It happened. I did it. What do I have to do different next time?
Yep.
How do I not do that again? How do I not get that created in my life? And that has been a major driver. Third and final, I would say, as I'm sort of processing your question, is that I've always operated under the assumption that you always do what you said you were going to do. You always do what you said you were going to do. And that has to be such a driving force. It was one of the rules, the life's rules. I call them the just in case rules for my kids. I put down my 10 just in case rules. And that was right up there along with personal responsibility. It was always do what you say you're going to do. And that almost becomes, you're afraid to say it because you know you can't make a commitment that you're not prepared to keep.
Absolutely.
So when you say it, it almost becomes a law in your life that you have to make it happen.
That's right.
And if you really have that commitment to how powerful your word is, it becomes a very powerful driver.
Yeah. No, it's when you're talking about this, you're hitting close to home, because that was my experience of my dad. That was
absolutely.
This is, I talk to people very much about being the CEO of their own life. And when you're the CEO, you're not allowed to make excuses. The buck stops with you. You're not allowed to say, I didn't know. You're not allowed to say, it's not my fault. You're in charge. I remember, actually, I was talking to somebody about this the other day. It was one of the very first things my father ever told me. I was a little kid. One of the very first lessons I remember. And he was always teaching. He was always telling me stuff.
Yeah.
And so I remember being like maybe 3, 4 years old in the car, and recently potty trained, and I'm with Dad, and we're going someplace, and we had to be somewhere. He told me he was going to be someplace, and I was like, Daddy, I have to go to the bathroom. And I remember him saying to me, son, sometimes you need to learn to soldier, right? And that was the idea that you didn't get to do what you want to do, and that was he many times throughout my life. And so you talk about the knowing where you want to get to, looking behind. I can tell you all these jobs he put me on, where the jobs were just like these endless battles of like taking down a mountain with a soup spoon kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you look at the mountain, you're like, this is not getting small. But you look behind this giant pile of dirt that you built, so it's coming from someplace. So like we're making progress. And so the idea of looking behind and looking for, I say, the way I think about it is, like, where do you want to end up? What do I got to do today to get from here to there? Like, how do I get closer?
Yeah.
But I remember talking about that, doing what you say you're going to do. Toward the end of my dad's life, we had this major outdoor event that we had to do. And I think you know that my father was a tremendous amount of pain toward the end. His legs, they thought he had fractures in his legs. He could barely stand, could barely walk.
Yeah.
And there were no pain medications that were oxycodone, Vicodin, whatever. It didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And so they were actually going to put a morphine pump inside of him to take and give him pain medication so that he could get around.
Yeah.
So we had this one event that we had to do, and we were shorthanded. And so it was this 6 a.m. to take and move an entire restaurant outdoors, and then feed a bunch of people from like 5 p.m. till 10 at night, and then tear everything back down, clean it, and put it away. So we usually it's like 6 a.m. till 2 a.m. to get this done. And because I was number one son, guess who gets to do the whole shift, right? And of course, it's on a Saturday on a work week. So like, it's just, you get one, there is no bonus package. You just get one less day of weekend, right?
Yeah.
And so I remember that we were shorthanded for the service portion of the day. And so we're getting all set up. We're finishing setup. It's getting ready to start the event. And I see my father's Cadillac pull up. And I think he's going to do a drive-by to just check on us. And I watch the old man pull himself out of the car, straighten himself up. I know the guy's in agony. Walk over to the event, and for 5 hours, stand there and work on legs they thought were broken.
Oh, my.
And it never mattered whether it could be done. It's what had to be done and how you're going to get it done.
Yeah.
And so for a guy that told me sometimes you need to learn to soldier, my father never told me something that he didn't do.
Yeah.
I saw him when he needed a soldier. I saw him stand to attention and march himself over there. And so when you talk about that, it's the stuff that you see, that stuff that's caught, right? And so, yeah, that responsibility. And I think that's always the thing that separated, where the wins come from, because other people aren't willing to do that. They're not willing to take the cost that's associated with being the kind of people that want to be. I say to people all the time, you can be Timex or Rolex, but if you're going to be a quality product, if you're going to commit to that, there's certain costs that have to be paid in order to be that quality product. You're going to have that kind of quality life.
Sure.
When the chips are down, you can't turn out a garbage product.
Right.
You have to pay the price to do the good. And so, yeah, man, as you're talking about that's hitting home in a deep place as I think about this.
Well, and for sure, your dad, your dad and I mean, one of the very many reasons we were just so kindred spirits, because honestly, just dealing with your dad, he was such a forceful person. And he was just just such an incredibly forceful person. His word was absolutely his bond.
That was it. Crush him to powder, scatter it to the four winds. But as long as he has breath in his lungs, he was going to do what he said he was going to do. That's who he was, because it was just part. It was part of how he was going to do this thing. And this is the thing. My brother. I wrote an ethics course with my brother. My brother's a philosophy professor, so why wouldn't we, right? That was the thing. And when I told him how they teach ethics in real estate, I said, well, what they do is there's 3 hours, and for 3 hours, they go over the rules. He says, that's terrible. That's not what ethics is. Ethics for 3,000 years has been the study of how to live a good life. Ethics is the way you behave as a human being to live a good life. And it's the idea that the founders of this country had when they talked about the pursuit of happiness. It's the joy someone gets from chasing a life well lived. Mm-hmm. Chasing a life well lived is not about going to the next party or doing that next thing that makes you feel good. It's living the kind of life that you can look back on and be proud of what you did.
Yeah.
And often that's dictated by, I think, the sacrifices that you make and the hills that you stand firm and are willing to die on. And so I think that's where the respect, I know the respect that I have for both you and my dad comes from, is the fact that I know there's not a lot of stand-up guys, but the cat.
I'm going to tell you a story, by the way, which I'm positive that you don't remember.
Okay.
When the school was being built next to the church, mm-hmm. and we're talking about school is going to be finishing, a school is going to be starting, and these buildings had to be done, and the contractor is delayed, seriously delayed, and your father's livid. He is absolutely livid. So he pulls me, he says, you got to come down. So I go down. We're going to do a sit down meeting with the contractor, and we're going to read him the riot act. And so your dad is saying, number one, you committed to doing this. School starts in 2 weeks. You committed to doing this. You're behind. You'll never be able to open. We're going to have a bunch of kids are coming, and where are they going to go? Where they're supposed to go. This was when the church started the schooling for the very first time. So they've got all these people lined up because it was a very successful church, and they've got all these kids lined up to go to school, but they ain't got they don't have any place to go because they're not ready. So your dad he's just using every level of persuasion that he can possibly use. And he's getting really irritated, and the contractor saying, I know, I get it, and I understand, Mr. Cadillac, but it can't be done. And your dad is not going to let him off the hook, man. And so literally, your dad looks at him at a certain point, and he says, you can get this done if you want to get this done. He says, I want you to look at my hand. I want you to see it as a gun. And I just cocked that gun, and I'm going to point it at you right now. And I'm going to tell you that you got one of two choices. But I'm doing it in retrospect, so I have to, I smile. But this was not the tone your father was using.
No.
Your father's New York, right? Your father's Brooklyn. So he points at him and he says, you got one of two choices. You get the thing done, or I'm going to shoot this gun. If you really believed me, would you be able to get this done in 2 weeks? And this guy's looking at him. He's not sure. Everybody knows the Godfather scene, right?
Yeah.
So, but he's not sure that your dad's not like
Connected. Yeah.
Yeah, he's not sure about this thing. And and your dad, who was as imposing as he was, is doing this, and he's looking at him dead in the eye.
Of course.
He says, could you get this done? And the guy says, yes, I guess I could. And your dad says, so whatever you thought, in order to get this done, get it done. That's it. And that was it. And then your dad and I didn't say another word. We walked out of the room.
Oh, it's classic. That's classic.
Really classic. And here's the story, as you may remember or not. School started on time.
Yeah. I think
that, talk about do what you said you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Your dad, that was just as sacrosanct. I don't know if we ever had that conversation, but we both acted that way.
Yeah, it's almost the kind of thing you don't have to have that conversation because you recognize the people of those kind of people, and they're such a rare breed. You want to be around them. I mean, it's the thing, and that's always one of the things I remember about my dad is the amount of tension that he was capable of generating in a negotiation, and the amount of tension he was completely comfortable being within in a negotiation.
Yeah. You
were going to do anything you could to get out of that room. I mean, I remember being a kid and not wanting to be in there. Where did all the air go?
Yeah. And
brutal. I had never heard that story. That's a great one, and it's just so him.
And by the way, I haven't told that story for a long time. But when I was on the lecture circuit, I used to tell that story when talking about intentionality, and just as an example of what I mean by intentionality, act with intention. Yeah, and because it otherwise has consequences. Act with intention. So in any event, that's you can take that story away at this point.
Oh no, that's a good one I hadn't heard, and believe me, it'll probably be coming back out again a few times because it is very much. I mean, I tell a story about the guy in New York that we had a tenant that he had a weed that started going between the edge of the building we was at and the lot. And the guy had my father had sent people to cut this weed that was now like a tree because the guy that was keeping his eyes and stuff up north wasn't paying attention, right? So he sends a guy over a chainsaw and a stump grinder to cut the thing down. And the tenant, never forget the guy's name is Igor. Igor goes and throws himself around the weed and says, "Don't cut down the trees. The trees beautify the neighborhood." Now, my father's temperament. He wasn't exactly thrilled with the fact that his people had just been sent away, but we were going to the city in like a week and a half. So my father goes, he drives by the property, gets out, knocks on the door. And I proceed to see one of the most beautiful melding of two negotiating techniques back to back. He starts talking to Igor about everything, local politics, extending the league, everything. And as he does, they're walking and talking, and they get to the lot. And my father sees the weed. He says to Igor, looks at Igor, he says, "Can you believe that? Can you believe something like that's going on my property?" He said, I sent people over here to cut this down, and some church word, right, inserted, person sends them away. What kind of a person does something like that? And Igor starts. So he's dumb blonde technique number one, right? Like he doesn't know that Igor did it, right? And then Igor starts, "Well, Bob, there's not enough green stuff in the neighborhood." He starts, and my father acts like he doesn't hear him. And he just starts to get angry. The vein comes out, everything. He's red. "Don't they realize this could bring this building down on some kid's head? Who doesn't care about human life like this? What's a tree compared?" And he's going. And by the time he's done, Igor's like, "Yeah, Bob, yeah, it's gotta go, right?" So he's done it, and Igor's like, "Bob, I think I have a fork or a knife inside. I could start cutting it down now." He's like, "Igor, it's not your problem. It's not your fault. Don't worry about Igor. I'll get my people to take care of it. You do your thing, Igor. Thank you, Mr. Cadillac. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming by. I appreciate." So I'm thinking my dad's pissed at this point too, because he's, the whole thing. By the way, in summary, my father got absolutely everything out of the negotiation he wanted. And by the way, the guy he was negotiating against liked them better afterwards than before he started. I mean, it's just like, this is like a master class in negotiation. I get in the car, I'm sitting next to him, and he says, "You see that, son? They start with the nonsense. You hit him with the 1-2."
Yeah.
I'm just mouth agape. I'm like, the whole thing, the whole getting angry was 100% a tactic, knock him off balance, and
Of course.
done.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so it was just, it was a thing. He was an interesting, I always tell people like most interesting man in the world had nothing on my dad. He had this like really interesting life that was just so, but
story after story for sure.
oh my goodness, that's, one of the things I thought most about when he finally passed away was all the stories.
Yeah.
Do I remember all the stories, and how many stories did he forget along the way? Because there's just this tremendous narrative history that he gave me of his life, because he had lived more than 50 years before I even came along.
Yeah.
And so there was just so much life. But without getting too far down the sentimental trail here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Larry, what is it you like best about what you do?
I just, Lee, from my standpoint, I love business. I just love business, period. I love every aspect of business. It's creative, it's developmental. It gives me the opportunity to manifest. I have visions of what I like, and it gives me the opportunity to be able to manifest those. I love I'm not a retail lawyer in the sense that, don't call me up. Hey, can you prepare a contract for me? No, that's not what I do. I'm a relationship lawyer. So I know every one of my clients personally. I know their businesses. I know their spouses. I know everything, I know their issues, regardless of what they're doing. And I do a freebie, if you will, strategic call with my clients every January. I send out in my January billing, I'll send out, regardless of whether we're doing any work with them or not, but, just want you to know that if you'd like to, have a, strategic call with me, let's talk about how this past year was, what your visions are for this year. Glad to be able to provide that to you for you on a complimentary basis. And then so many of my clients take me up on it, and I'll send them a letter that says, "Fantastic, delighted, in anticipation of a scheduled call. Let me give you some themes to think about." And I actually identify, pockets for them to think about. And then we go through the call, and then I follow it up with a summary. And so it does a number of things for me. First of all, it builds relationship, obviously.
Sure.
Secondly, it gives me more insight into their businesses, what their strengths are, where they see the issues that are going to be, the difficulties they had this past year, how they might want to be handling those this year, and so forth and so on. So that's the type of, so you say, what do you enjoy most? Well, number one, I enjoy business. But number two, I really, really enjoy the personal relationship I have with my clients.
Sure. Now you're more than just the lawyer guy. You're a guy that's in there trying to take and make the thing that they do better.
Yeah. I mean, in your dad's case, Josh, I slept over your house. How many times did I sleep over your house?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, I would never go down to see your father that we didn't, have a wonderful dinner together. Yep. Or I didn't go over to your house and your dad would barbecue. Yep. And, he'd feed the side of a cow for this big.
Yeah. No, I say all the time to people, in New York, if you got somebody that's good, what do you say? You say, I got a guy, right? I got this person that I know I can recommend, because you know what? They're a stand-up person. They do what they say they're going to do. And I say to agents in real estate all the time, why is every customer you've ever worked with not saying that about you?
Yeah.
If they're not, that's a problem in your businesses. And as a CEO of your business, you need to do something about that, because in our industry, we have a 12% customer retention rate.
Hmm.
And so, what you're talking about is not what most people in your business do. And it
Right.
is the thing that makes it unique. And the reality of the relationship you have with your customers is unique because of your willingness to do the things that
Mhm.
other people won't do.
Yeah.
And truly, it winds up being the part of the business that you enjoy the most, which is fantastic, because as it turns out, when you run a business you're proud of, well, you don't mind going to work every day so much. It's kind of a cool side note of that. So how about I ask you this, maybe a market question for a second. What do you see the opportunity in the market today? What has you excited in the market today?
Well, I mean, obviously we're probably going to spend a little bit more rocky time until such time as the Fed calms down and it just allows interest rates to, stabilize enough that everybody can start revolving around them. So, so that because what they need, the big issue was not the increase in interest rates. It was just simply the speed of the increase in the interest rates, which was just so incredibly destabilizing that you wonder how in the world smart people could not have recognized what they were going to do to the banking industry when they increased rates, especially when the rates were, down near zero for 10 years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden in a 12-month period of time, they go up, 500 basis points. So
I use everybody's holdings. Yeah, no,
yeah, just absolutely bizarre. So, I think that we're at a point now where, I think that for the balance of 2023, you'll probably see a certain amount of stabilizing. I think you still need some more economic quarters and things of that, several more quarters. And I think 2024 is going to start the turn back to the hugely just powerful economy America has.
mm,
It is the most powerful economy in the world.
resilient and powerful. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. So that's all we need is just stable rules.
Yeah.
And, you give them the stable rules and the economy is so robust that it's going to fill in the gaps. So I'm seeing the beginning of that process occurring in 2024.
Yeah.
And with that, I do certainly think that, the various asset classes and sectors that you would see prior to, that we had seen prior to,
Mhm.
especially, for example, in real estate will continue to be robust. I
Sure.
think that the only difference is, at least it's going to be robust in its own right. It's not going to be robust because it was subsidized by 0% interest rates
Right.
at the Fed rate, at the Fed level. So,
Mhm.
I certainly see that as going to be stronger as time goes on. We've also learned a lot, and we've had some displacements, primarily because of COVID.
Yeah.
So you do have, with the remote work, you do have some influences that are going to influence what that looks like. So, but nothing that would suggest that there are not plenty of opportunities in that category.
Sure.
I think certainly there. I think number two, I think that we have become a tech centric country, and it's now a tech century millennium. I mean, the reality is technology has taken over. And I really do absolutely believe that artificial intelligence is as powerful as the internet revolution was in just simply creating a modality that has just life-changing implications attached to it.
Sure.
So I certainly would see that from a market standpoint, what can be done to the extent that we have an internet, to the extent that everybody carries a smartphone, and to the extent that we have large language models that are capable of doing what AI can do.
Mhm.
I'm certainly seeing that as having a huge amount of application in every aspect of every direction in every sector. So that's why I'm along with three other people, I founded the company in artificial intelligence, because I do think that's really pretty strong.
I can
So I
see
see that.
the real estate side. I can see it being a huge opportunity just having something that can adapt to overcoming objections, and that you can turn loose to take and make cold calls and things like that, that people
No, I
just,
know, absolutely.
it's just, what for a real estate broker, you can now provide your people with tons of leads and not have to have them pick up the phone call even once.
Oh, no, exactly. Exactly.
It's a thing. So what do you think the most important things you've learned in the process of doing what you do would be?
These are all great questions, Josh. I'm surprised I don't even think of most important things.
Yeah, just like as you think back, like usually either from the wins or from the big losses, we pick up stuff along the way. Pain and suffering being one of the great educators in life, sadly.
I think that I had a conversation with Jordan, who, by the way, is now 28. He's my oldest son, by the way, for your viewers and listeners. He's a lawyer also. And he went to Georgetown Law School, Boston College, Georgetown Law School. He did 2 years at a big law firm in Boston. And then he had the opportunity to become a clerk to a federal district court judge. So that's what he's now doing. And he's got a year and a half left of that. It's a 2-year gig. And so we were talking about, kind of what he wants to do after that. And without getting into the details of that, I made a comment to him, which I think would probably be number one answer to, or at least number one on the list of answers for your question. And I said, sweetie pie, by all means, always be true to your brand. Always protect your brand. You are a brand, and you need to protect that, because that brand is the brand that you will spend your life creating, and you want to feel it authentically, who you are, and you want everybody to see who you are. You want an authentic brand that is not only authentic, but that is consistent with what everybody sees. So always be protective of your brand. I remember coming out of law school and saying to myself that, and I didn't think of it in those days based on brand, but I thought about it in a different way. And that was that no matter what I do in life, I want to make sure that I always protect my soul. I always want to protect my soul, because I didn't want to I didn't want life's pressures to in some way infect me in a way which would infect who I was as a person.
Sure.
So, and I think that has really just formulated more as time went on in that lesson. And, I said to my son, I said, believe me, there are times in which I was not true to my brand and would absolutely do it differently today, recognizing, and I'm not saying, by the way, a lot of times, but I can, I could think of some examples in my mind about that, just as I remember them, about how that wasn't true to who I really was as a person. So in any event, I would say that's number one. I think number two, to carry, quote Teddy Roosevelt, it's always speak softly, carry a big stick, but speak softly.
Yeah.
You don't need to be loud. You don't need to be boisterous. You speak softly and carry a big stick.
Yeah.
The big stick is what counts. Speaking softly is all you need when you're carrying a big stick.
Absolutely.
So speak softly. And then I think, probably number three, be kind. Just be kind.
Yeah.
Just, as a person, just be kind. There are people who are just as people, not kind. Mm-hmm. And you just wonder about that. It's kind of like, what are you going for? I don't even, an unkind person, I just don't understand what they're going for.
Yeah.
Because we are really short on this lifetime.
Yeah.
We got it. I knew it theoretically in earlier years. I know it a lot less theoretically today. And I will 10 years from now know it even less theoretically.
Yeah.
So life's short. It might be 100, 90, 80, 70, whatever it is, life's short. So what are you going for when you're going to
What does the wind
live,
look like? Yeah, you're going for it.
yeah, when you're going to live that life in a way that is not kind to other people?
And they seem like they're unhappy people in general. And so it's like it's almost
That's right.
like they're miserable and they're making other people miserable and like they're there to spread misery. And it's
That's right.
kind of an ethics idea that, living well and treating people well and all leads to you actually living that
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Absolutely. So I would say those three, maybe.
Those are great ones. So what do you think that in this position, the bird's eye view here, if you will, what would you say, looking back, you're most proud of in business that you've accomplished?
I'm most proud of in business.
Yep.
Probably, I'm a startup guy. I'm a startup guy. So I am proud that I was never a replicator. When I created the Desktop Lawyer, it was the first of its kind.
Mm-hmm.
You can now consider the Desktop Lawyer to be LegalZoom.
Yeah.
And if my life had not gone on, Desktop Lawyer would have been LegalZoom.
Mm-hmm.
So it is originality. All business that I didn't, oh, that's a great idea, I'm going to do it. No, it hadn't been created, so I'm going to do it. I saw it in my mind. So, when we created the seminar company, the training company, it was, that company was best of breed. It was a $250 million a year company, largest training organization, privately owned training organization in the country. And it was private. With 600 employees, we had 32 teams on the road, 8 product lines. We had top-notch software, top-notch training programs. And it was literally best of breed. And the only reason it failed, obviously, is because consumers stopped showing up because of the recession.
Yeah.
And even then, I sold off all the parts to, I sold off the software to a brokerage house and sold off the international operations to another brokerage house. And eventually, got rid of the receivables and all that kind of thing. So the bottom line is, it was really creating a top notch. I literally knew nothing about senior living. And Tuscan Gardens is now 130 to 160,000 square foot communities. One down near you, Delray Beach, Tuscan Gardens of Delray Beach,
Cool.
Tuscan Gardens of Benicia Bay in Venice, and Tuscan Gardens of Palm Coast in Flagler County. It's assisted living and memory care. They're absolutely, if you want to just, when you take a look at TuscanGardens.com, you will see absolutely gorgeous communities. And the only thing more gorgeous than the photos is walking through and seeing them. And that came from nothing other than a vision in my mind. I mean, it was solid ether. And it became brick and mortar where, 390 residents live now. So I guess, in short, I'm probably most proud of the fact that I was never a bottom feeder. I always created quality. I always wanted to produce at the highest productive level, high performance, whatever. It was going to be a high performance leadership team. It was going to be a high performance culture. It was going to be no matter what it was, whether it was an office or a business or a company or a community, it was always going to be the best of the best. And that's sort of what my mentality has always been. And maybe, I guess that's probably what I'm most proud of.
That is right out of my dad's playbook too, man. I hear that. I remember the big sign inside the plant where only the employees could see it. Quality
Yeah.
and service are our only products.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, it always had to be the biggest and the best. Always had to be, oftentimes more than what was needed. But yeah, that's a great thing to be.
Yeah.
Your calling card that you built great stuff every place that you went. So, all right, this is easier stuff. Last couple of questions, but they're pretty
Oh,
easy.
geez. Okay.
So, what one piece of advice would you give our listeners? What would be the one piece of advice you could say? Hey, you know what? This is a good one to hang on to.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, everything that we've been talking about would be comments that I would give, but what it really does boil down to are really the comments that we've already talked about. Know yourself, know who you are, and center yourself. Don't chase a dollar.
Yeah.
Don't chase the dollar. Center, know who you are, protect who you are, and what gives you joy. And then center your life around, I call it integrational. I call it integrational processing.
Mm-hmm.
It is integrating who you are as a person with the business that you're in and the market that you serve. That's integrational processing. So you're an integrated human being. You don't have a work life and a personal life.
Yep.
You have a life.
It's a life, and
it's a life, and you're fully integrated in your life, and you can create who you are, and what you want to be, and what you will be, and you can create a business with that, and you can extend it out into whatever market you want to really create in. So I would say, that piece of advice to me is so critical, because there are so many dysfunctional people today. And one reason they're dysfunctional is just simply because they're not integrated.
Yeah.
They're leading too many disintegrated facets of their life.
Yeah.
So I would say that.
Yeah.
And I would say and the only other piece of advice I would give is the flip side of the same coin. And that is, always do your best to always contribute value. Always contribute value. Just whatever it is, whatever it is you encounter, let it be better because you encountered it. Always create value.
Yeah, that's what my father told me since a little boy. Always leave it better than you found it.
Yeah,
that's a thing. All right, this should be an easy one. What one book or one movie would you recommend to anybody listening?
The one book or one movie.
Choice, book or movie.
A book or a movie. There's so many. I'm just trying to.
I know it's tough to narrow it down, isn't it?
I know it's really tough to narrow them down. I mean, there are so many good ones.
What's nuts for me is it keeps changing too. So like I have one that's like for 6 months or a year is like, no, this is the book you got to check out. And then I read something else that's a real game changer.
You're probably going to, obviously the first that comes to mind is obviously one of my favorites, which is Godfather. It's clearly Godfather, so that's one of the favorites. And I would always leave that with your viewers and listeners. If you haven't seen it, you got to see it.
Absolutely.
But one that I will tell you just really hits from a heartful standpoint is Cinema Paradiso. Cinema Paradiso.
Okay.
I think that you will absolutely feel it, and it's got every bit of anything that you could possibly imagine. It's got full heart, and it has really sort of the human. It is a manifestation of the human situation, the human condition, and is just, warning, it's a tearjerker. At the end of the day, it's a tearjerker, but it's that heart that you'll feel. Yeah.
No, I get that. All right. Well, I know you're always going a million miles an hour. What is next for you? What's the next on the horizon, the next thing coming your way?
Really just a little bit more of the same.
Okay.
I'm looking forward to the law practice goes great. So I'm just enjoying that. Janet and I are going to travel more. So we are now, Isabella is now a rising junior. She's pursuing her bachelor MBA. So she's a rising junior, and matter of fact, she's now a summer program in Spain. So we've now scheduled, especially post-COVID. So we're now scheduling 3 to 4 vacations a year, which are adventure travel. So we went to Easter Island, for example, in March.
Nice.
We've got up the Danube in September. We're scheduling Istanbul, for early part, and the Galapagos Islands in the summer. So more adventure travel, more of those types of trips,
Awesome.
which we'll be doing. And I am looking forward to building the AI company. I think that we could do some really fun things with that.
I imagine so. All right, last question. You survived the gauntlet. Where can people find you?
Oh, but believe me, I'm not invisible. That's all they have. That's all they have to do is they just Google Larry Pino, and they'll get a whole lot of stuff.
Way more than they bargained for.
Oh yeah, I think that whether it's I got 14 books out there. I've got the blog, the blog site. I've got larrypino.com. So it doesn't matter. Just Google Larry Pino and they'll find me.
Awesome. Larry, thank you so much for the time, for hanging out with us, for all the stories and all the wisdom, sir. Greatly appreciated.
Well, you're welcome for that. And thanks for the invitation. And it was wonderful to go down memory lane with you, Josh. And you've done, and congratulations, by the way, you've done sensational.
Thank you, sir. I greatly appreciate it.